Hi, everyone. Welcome to BAASS Podcast, where we have Paraman and Barry on the call today to talk about grant tracking. So, thank you, Paraman and Barry, for joining me today. Barry is a senior account executive at BAASS Business Solutions, and Paraman is our practice leader for Sage Intacct. Barry, can you start off with giving a little information about yourself?
Yeah, I'm one of the executive account managers here at BAASS, and I work in the Sage Intacct space, and I've been working a lot with the non-for-profit um, agencies over the last couple of years, and I got well experienced in terms of what they are looking for in terms of business solutions and how to create better efficiencies in the non-for-profit space. Is what I do.
Amazing. Paraman, can you give us a little details about yourself?
Thank you for having us, Sarah. I've been practicing as a consultant for about 25 years. Before that, I've had accounting titles. I've been working with several not for profit associations, including the United Ways, a couple of them, and thoroughly understand the current challenges they go through and what they need to fulfill in order to be compliant.
Amazing. So today's conversation is centered around grant tracking. So to start things off, a quick question to you, Barry. Why do Canadian non-for-profit organizations need to track their grants?
Accountability, probably, because at the end of the day, a lot of the non-for-profits and social service agencies, they need to report back to their funders. So the government being probably the biggest ones, but also now more even private donations that come in, they need to report back to these organizations as to just how that money was spent. So it's big an accountability piece.
So when it comes to when you speak with customers, how are they currently tracking their grants?
Hmm. Unfortunately, it's Excel. That's the product of choice that each and every one of them use. It's the only tool that they effectively can capture some of that cost information that they need to do, and that's the tool that they use is Microsoft Excel.
I I love Excel, but what would be some of the drawbacks to doing it this way?
A lot of it is it's a manual process, right? And the challenges that a lot of the non-for-profits have is now it's not about just coming up with a number. They need to come up with a number and how that was been spent at. They have to get very granular in terms of their reporting. So they can't. They look at it and say, okay, well now you need to know what the cost is at a department level, and within each department, people can have multiple different programs. So they have to get very granular in terms of how they need to report on that. And the challenge for that is that it's a manual process. So you got Excel sheets that are going back and forth between case managers, social workers, if you will, that are department heads and are going back to accounting. They might miss something, it goes back, like that kind of stuff. So that's a big challenge because it leads to the delay and timeliness in them being able to produce these reports to the ministry or the people that need to be able to get access to that. So it's very challenging for the finance team when they have deadlines that they need to produce these budget to actual reports, variance reports on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual basis to the funders because of the back and forth that has to go back with their team members in finance. So it's reliability, accuracy. A lot of things can get mixed in a setup like that. That's the challenge, or several of them.
So basically, what you're saying is not only will it cost time and therefore money to produce the reports they need, but then they run the risk of not receiving the grants because they may miss some certain criteria when it comes to the reporting.
100%, because every non-for-profit agency knows that if they don't spend what they've been given next year, they may not get that funding back, and they all know that. So the more visibility that you can get into where their programs are at, that's better for them because that'll just ensure that that funding model can continue for their organization. It's critical, critical, critical. And then, of course, the challenges that we just mentioned, but also the stress component that happens with a lot of these finance teams, it's not fun. And I think I can talk, 10 times out of 10, there's a lot of pressure on these guys that are trying to put this information together because their programs depend on that type of information. So it can be challenging, to say the least.
And I would imagine they would want to focus on the efficacy of their programs rather than the reporting. So, Paramin, how can organizations track their grants in Sage Intacct?
In Intacct, we have a few options to automate and provide timely visibility, not to just the finance team, but also the relevant grant or program managers. Additionally, the workflow and approval features built in Intacct, we can achieve interoperability, providing the latest information to all team members. So Barry earlier talked about the challenges is the information is not timely, and the other thing is the multiple versions of the truth. There are silos of information maintained by multiple team members. In Intacct, we are able to promote and achieve the single version of truth, of the visibility, with the concept of business users that are finance team members and employee users that are, for example, program or grant managers. Intacct prices the user licenses accordingly, and Barry can add to the subject more.
I was just going to ask in terms of the difference between business user licensees and the employee user and the kind of feedback you receive from customers on the difference.
Yeah, so in a lot of the kind of legacy-based systems or people that are using, some of the Sage 300 products or whatever, there's a license, which is an accounting user, and there's no like modified user. In the modernized accounting world, in something like Sage Intacct, they have what's called a business user and then an employee user. And it's hugely significant because in accounting, the business user is the accounting user transacting in the system and at the GL level. That's an accounting, that's a business user. The huge benefit to an employee user is that employee user no longer needs an Excel spreadsheet to be able to track their costs, because that employee user can gain access or has access to their program cost information as an employee user. So they're in the accounting system, but they're not touching the accounting stuff, but they have visibility into where their program is at. So then they're just verifying certain components as an employee user, and that automatically feeds to the accounting. So there's no back and forth between accounting staff with manual spreadsheets. That's the beauty about an employee user. So an employee user would be somebody that's in charge of a department or a program. The executive director could be an employee user, people on the board, shareholders that could gain access to those reports on a monthly basis that they all meet on as an employee user. So when you think about driving efficiency within that organization and the timeliness to get that information out to the funders, etc., it just allows for a much more efficient kind of operation, I guess, from a reporting standpoint, which is critical.
No, absolutely. So Paraman, you said that there was basic methods that the non-for-profit can choose from to manage their grants. And from my understanding, one pertains to more of the dimension element, and the other one is a fully functional grant tracking and billing module. Can you speak more to it?
Yeah, that's correct, Sarah. With Intacct, we have two options: the basic grant or program tracking, which only provides the dimension, which is useful for organizations tracking the grants or programs. The fully functional grant tracking and billing module is exactly same as project tracking and billing for for-profit organizations. So the good news here is if you have multiple entities that are a combination of for-profit and not-for-profit, you get the same product acting as a project tracking and billing for the for-profit side. The module extends the capability with tasks as an additional level of tracking. Also comes with the expense tracking and time tracking for employees, and provides the ability to create invoices either to recognize the revenue, so it's a mini revenue recognition capability, or to build a funder if that's the compliance feature that your organization is following. You could generate billings for the funder as well.
So can you give an example for one of the methods or both of a customer you've helped to implement the Sage Intacct software and how they used it and just how it changed the way they conducted their workflow?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In Intacct, we also have the concept of commitments. At times, not-for-profit organizations are issuing purchase orders. What we do, we book them as commitments and add the actuals and the commitments and then compare them to the budget value by program or by grants, however the reporting is required. And this visibility is great for not only the finance team, but also for the program and grant managers who need to stay on top of their spending in relation to the budgeted and the grant amounts. And we are able to achieve that through just the basic grant or program tracking, but the full version can be used for companies that require, like I said, the expense tracking and also need to do time tracking. If they have employees working in multiple programs and they need to allocate time, for example, and then they could use those modules as well. So those two modules, expense tracking and time tracking, come complementary with the full grant tracking and billing software. Now, the other part where we have customers using the capability is the grant is promised and it cannot be recognized as revenue in their financial statements till a certain milestone is reached. So that milestone is maintained in the grant tracking and billing. And when that step is achieved, we generate a billing, not necessarily to send to the grantor, but to recognize the revenue. So that's another option we are able to use in the grant tracking and billing system.
Amazing. So it sounds like there are definitely many options that a non-for-profit organization can select when it comes to Sage Intacct. So my best recommendation is for organizations to contact their BAASS business solutions account manager or marketing, so that way if they want to learn more, that they can book a discovery call. So thank you, Paraman and Barry, for your time today. I really appreciate your insight on the grant tracking, and thank you to everyone who had took the time to spend some time with us today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye now.
Bye.